Next on the programme, I'm delighted to be joined by Ireland's Ombudsman. His name is Ger Deering, and for those of you who may not know what the role of the Ombudsman is, he can investigate your complaints once you've complained to the service provider whose action or decision has affected you. And you can make your complaints through a special website, which is ombudsman.ie. So if you have complained to a government department, maybe the Department of Social Welfare, maybe the Revenue Commissioners, your local county council, the Health Service Executive, public hospitals, publicly funded third level educational bodies, public and private nursing homes, or of that nature, then this will be of interest to you, because I know that back in 2022 there were 4,791 complaints received by the Ombudsman. From Mayo, of those 4,791, there were 84. But more people from Mayo contacted the Ombudsman last year, 141 in fact, from the over 4,000 total complaints received by the Ombudsman office. First of all, Ger, thanks for joining us and good morning.
Good morning, Tommy. Thanks very much for having us on.
So I hope I've explained it correctly there. If I decide to engage with, say, for example, my local county council on an issue that has affected me to do with public street lighting or a diversion or a change of route of a road or something of that nature, and I'm not happy or content with the kind of response I've received from them. Now, I'm only taking the county council as an example. It could be my local hospital, it could be the Revenue Commissioners, it could be any government department or private nursing home, public nursing home and so on. And I'm not happy with whatever has evolved. I can contact you and you will investigate it.
That's correct, Tommy. Actually, I was struck by your positive message there a minute ago where Dermot said you were not alone. I suppose I could use that phrase as well to say, you know, if you've had, as you say, a bad experience, or you feel you've not been served well by a public body, you've complained to that body and you're unhappy with the outcome, then you can come to us. So what we do is we firstly try to, we'll obviously listen to the person, hear and understand what their complaint and their issue is, and then we engage with the public body and we try to resolve it informally, and very often we do. The vast majority of our complaints, actually, we manage to resolve them informally and quickly. But where that doesn't happen and where we're unable to resolve it informally, we carry out an investigation. And having carried out that investigation, then I can make a recommendation as to what the public body should do or what the outcome of that investigation is.
And when you say you can make a recommendation, is that as far as you can go? If you genuinely believe that the recommendation, which is obvious, you wouldn't make the recommendation if you didn't feel it's what should happen, are the public body then, are they forced to take on board your recommendation, or can they just continue to do what they've done prior to your recommendation?
The public the recommendations are not legally binding. They are recommendations rather than legally binding decisions. However, we have a very good record of actually getting our recommendations implemented. And there is what I'd call a kind of a moral suasion. And we have certain levers, if you like, that we can use in terms of our annual report and publication and going to the Oireachtas. So we don't just stop at making a recommendation. If we believe, which, you know, unless the public body has somehow persuaded us that our recommendation isn't the right one, we will follow that up and we will endeavour to ensure that it is implemented. Now, the record, as I said, Tommy, is that the vast majority of the recommendations are implemented because many of the public bodies actually acknowledge the value of having an independent third party look at this. And it's important maybe to remind people that we are independent. We don't take sides in this. We're not the champion necessarily of the person who has had the complaint. We're neutral and we stay in the middle, because that's how we can be of best value to everybody, by looking at this from the outside and seeing, was what happened reasonable? Was it fair? Was it in accordance with maybe the rules of a scheme, or, you know, has the public body been unreasonable? And another thing we take into account is the person's human rights. And sometimes there's a lot of literature around what human rights comprise of, but we consider them to be that people are treated with respect and dignity, that somebody is treated like you would want that when you go to receive a public service or to inquire about a public service, you'd want to be treated the same way that you would treat your parents, your children, your siblings. So we look at it through that human rights lens as well, to see not only sometimes maybe the person wasn't actually entitled to the service or the grant or whatever they looked for, but that doesn't mean they're not entitled to be listened to and treated with respect and dignity. So we look at that as well.
Are you at liberty, Ger, to disclose what bodies you get the most complaints about?
Yes, now we've not finished crunching last year's numbers, but it varies between local authorities generally across the country and government departments. And I suppose when you think of the interaction that those two bodies, that government bodies, particularly say the Department of Social Protection, would have, or that county councils would have, and the increase in relation to county councils is being generated generally by housing. And that, again, is not surprising given the difficulties that people are experiencing in terms of accessing housing. Now, as you can imagine, we can't actually deliver houses for people, but what we can do, again, is look at how they're treated. You know, for example, we came across a situation where somebody complained to us, a family, it was actually a traveller family in this instance, had received the council had written to all of the housing applicants, asking them to confirm that their housing needs still remained. This family didn't actually return the form for one reason and another, but the local authority took them off the housing list. When they discovered they'd been taken off the housing list, they went back and the council agreed to reinstate them on the housing list, but only from the current date. And these people had been 12 years on the housing list before they were taken off. So after our intervention, the council rightly put them back, gave them back, if you like, the 12 years that they had lost through not replying to that letter. And the learnings from those kind of situations is, don't just send one letter and expect that, if somebody doesn't reply, to take the major step of removing them from the housing list. There are other ways to communicate with people, and to ensure that they actually receive the letter in the first place.
Your role is mainly to investigate complaints made by a member of the public against most public bodies. But I see in the list here that you will also investigate complaints against public and private nursing homes.
Yes, and that's primarily because the vast majority of nursing homes are actually funded publicly. It may not appear that way, but if you know the fair deal and those kind of subventions. So the vast majority of private nursing homes actually receive a significant amount of public money. So where the state is contracting that kind of a service, we have the right to deal with complaints. And one example was where a gentleman was released from hospital. It was expected that he would go into a nursing home for a short period of time. It didn't work out like that. He was there much longer, but nobody actually told the family or the gentleman concerned that he was being charged. He had gone from a public hospital into a private nursing home. He thought he was still in the public system. It was not an unreasonable assumption. But some months later, the family were presented with a bill for €32,000. They engaged with the nursing home, who argued that this had been incurred. Then they complained to us and we engaged with the nursing home, and I'm happy to say that common sense prevailed and the nursing home actually wrote off that money, because it was very unfair to expect somebody to pay for that when they hadn't been told in advance that they were actually going to be charged in the first place. We've also dealt with situations where people have had poor communications with nursing homes, or I can think of another example where a person actually left a nursing home, was missing for some time. When they were found, the nursing home carried out an investigation. The family obviously were distressed and wanted to know what happened, and the nursing home refused to actually share that information with the family. But again, and the interesting thing in that case was that a good investigation had been done, but they weren't sharing the information with the family. But it was shared with them after we engaged with the nursing home.
Dealing with over 4,000 complaints last year, and the year before nearly 5,000, that's an awful lot of complaints. Is there a kind of a filtering process when you look at maybe the information given to you by an individual that you believe doesn't merit an investigation? Is there still an onus on you to investigate, or can you make the decision at a very early stage that this simply doesn't stack up?
Yeah. Well, we do a kind of a triage. Now, the only complaints that we really wouldn't progress with would be sometimes those complaints aren't actually for us. It may have something to do with an airline or, some private enterprise that we can't deal with. So those are the only complaints that we would close without actually progressing them at all. The next batch, I suppose, of complaints then would fall into the category of where we feel maybe we'd be able to resolve them fairly quickly through, contact with the public body. And as I mentioned earlier, then we go on to investigate. But there is another, I suppose, arm to what we do, and that is I can carry out an own initiative investigation. So just taking what you're saying there, if we see a particular number of complaints about one area, for example, last year, we identified that the treatment abroad schemes, these are very good schemes actually run by the HSE, whereby if people can't access treatment in this country or can't access it in a timely manner, they can actually have the treatment done abroad and have the cost refunded to them. And we found a number of people making complaints to us had actually gone through the process in good faith and done what was required of them. However, for example, in some cases, the GP referral letter or the referral letter wasn't actually signed by the consultant or the GP. It was signed maybe by their secretary. So somebody went abroad, had the treatment done, paid for it, came back seeking the refund and was, through no fault of theirs, blocked from getting that refund because of a technicality. I'm glad to say we carried out an own investigation report. We made 21 recommendations, and Bernard Gloucester, as soon as he came into his new job at the time, agreed to implement all 21 recommendations. And I have to say the team in the HSE are implementing those very effectively. So that's an example of where people benefited. Quite a number of people have actually got back money that they were entitled to that they had been denied. But maybe equally as importantly, the schemes are now running differently and those kind of barriers aren't being put in people's way. So that shows you that it's not just the people who make complaints who benefit. Our services have benefit to people who maybe don't even know about the office.
Yeah. By the way, do you have any stats around the percentage of cases that you take that, what percentage has been in favour of the customer and the business?
In the region of nearly about 50%, people benefit in one way or another. Either the complaint was actually upheld or we've been of some assistance to the person in actually gaining a service or getting what it was that they were looking for. So there are obviously complaints that people make where, but sometimes even where the complaint is not upheld, it can be of benefit in that the person maybe gets a better explanation or a better understanding, or indeed many people appreciate that a third party has looked at this and said, no, what the council did or what the Department of Social Protection did was not unreasonable. That's how the scheme works. You don't qualify. Therefore, there isn't anything to be done. People, I'm not saying they always appreciate when a complaint is not upheld, but sometimes that explanation is beneficial to them.
Yeah, it's interesting. You said earlier on, that an awful lot of complaints against, county councils, and we would see that here of all of the complaints that we get to this programme and have been over many years. Probably local authorities, the most complaints, followed probably by the HSE. And also by the legal profession, but because predominantly the legal profession is private sector, have you any input into maybe following them in the context of any complaints?
No, there is actually a separate, as you say, the vast majority of legal, other than people who work in the public sector, they're actually private businesses, but there is a regulatory authority that oversees that profession and also that deals with complaints against them. So it's
so it doesn't not under your remit. All right. Well, look, I think it's important that people realise that you're there, the Ombudsman, and that anybody who has tried to make a complaint to a service provider, mainly public body, and the decision or the action that they've taken has affected you, whether it's financially, whether it's to do with your emotional well-being, whatever it might be, you are there prepared to take their case if you feel it's justified and see if an impasse can be found. You enjoy the work?
I do. It's great, Tommy, when you're given the privileged position, if you like, of being able to help others and make a difference. I see even our own staff, the impact it has on them. For example, I mentioned the treatment abroad scheme. We knew that some of those people, they didn't have the money. They had borrowed the money from maybe the credit union or for a family member to go and have the treatment done. In fact, we called our report In Sickness and in Debt, the EBT, because what happened with these people is they had the treatment done, they had their health improved, but they then ended up in debt. So I can see that from our own staff, how invested they are in just trying to get fairness and reasonableness. So if you can correct a wrong, or if you can, as I say, make a difference in people's lives like that, it is quite a privilege.
Yeah, it's a free service.
It is absolutely a free service.
Okay.
And people can either contact us on ombudsman.ie or by telephone at 01639 5600. And we do use what I called old-fashioned innovation, in that we do actually answer the phone and we do talk to people if they ring us.
Okay, very good. So otherwise people might start complaining. So again, check it out. You can make a complaint on ombudsman.ie. You can call them on Dublin. That's 01639 5600. That's 01639 5600. You can also do it even more old-fashioned way and write to the office of the Ombudsman at 6 Earlsford Terrace, Dublin 2. That's 6 Earlsford Terrace in Dublin 2. And if you missed any of those details, call us here and we'll pass them on to you. Lovely to talk to you, Ger. Keep up the great work and thanks for sharing with us your responsibility and your role as the Ombudsman.
Thanks for the opportunity, Tom.
Not at
Thank
all.
you.
Have a good day.
You too.